For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Shotgun Spratling for its analysis of USC's second day of spring camp. Now, friendly reminder, Thursdays are the one day that we actually can't go to practice, so our day is done, but USC's day is not. But we got to hear from defensive coordinator Todd Orlando and linebacker Kana'i Mauga. And Shotgun, if we somehow forgot that Orlando does not like practices without pads, we were reminded this morning, which is kind of funny that we talked to him basically before day two, because he kind of discounts all practices before they put the pads on. So he kind of gave us a preview of what he expects, but he didn't really want to share any observations yet.
Yeah, he's basically a defensive coordinator. He says that anything done without pads is just kind of worthless, in his opinion, just because you don't really get to get a full judgment until a 20-year-old is attacking you rather than a high school kid, and going full speed at you and trying to hit you. So it's definitely different for him, but he's excited about the spring. That's for sure. Just the opportunity to build their culture. That's one of the big things that, he feels like they missed out on by not having last year's spring camp, only having that one practice. So that's one of the big things that he's looking forward to, but he's definitely looking forward right now in spring camp rather than looking back at the first practice and taking too much away from it.
Yeah, for sure. And I thought it was interesting, given that on Tuesday we heard from both Clay Hilton and Graham Harrell that it was hard for the team to miss spring camp. That's obviously a big time for development and teaching. And Todd Orlando built off that today, saying that it's hard to instill culture and a new defense when you're basically rushing for a fall season and skipping spring camp. So in that sense, I'm curious what it'll be like this spring, now that Todd Orlando doesn't have to weigh, hey, we have a game in a couple of weeks, so maybe we don't go as hard, because as we know, he likes the physical practices.
Yeah, he said one of the things he was later asked about establishing culture. What exactly do you mean by that? And it's taking guys, he said human nature is to do B work and to feel like, hey, I'm doing B work, I'm doing fine, leave me alone. But to establish a culture is to push guys to do A plus work. And by that, he means just pushing them, to give a little bit more. And he said, when you're doing that, it involves, all right, now we got to do some tackling drills. We got to push people to, test their mettle to see where they're at, to see where we can continue to push them. And said, you have to start balancing that when you're in a fall camp and you got 4 weeks to a game. He said, okay, do we want to do 2 weeks where we're really trying to push people and then pull back 2 weeks to keep everybody kind of healthy? He said that was a difficult balancing act, whereas spring, you push. If some guys go down with some injuries, then you should be able to get everybody back by the fall camp. But in spring, that's when you really want to establish it, especially as a new coaching staff. And they just didn't have that opportunity to do that. So now he's really looking forward to trying to push guys and try to get that A+ effort out of guys. He said, because that's the difference in hoisting a trophy and not. He said, you hope that the other team is doing B+ work and you're doing A+ work. So if you can push those guys to give that extra bit. And, he said it starts with the workouts. He's been very impressed with what they've done so far in the workouts with Robert Steiner and that group, Bobby Steiner and the boys. He's been impressed with the work that they're doing there. And he said it starts there, because if you're lax outside the game, there'll come a time when you're lax in the game. And he said, even if you love ball, there'll come a time where, it's just not worth it to you to give your 100%. So I thought that was a very interesting line from him there, and that they're building stuff starting with the workouts, but now they want to actually, put them in some difficult situations this spring and see how some of the players react.
One of the biggest questions for the defense this spring is, how do you replace a guy like Talanoa Hufanga, or Tally as Orlando calls him? What do you have to say about that, Shotgun?
Well, first he said, he's been very fortunate with having Craig Naivar on his staff, since their Houston days, that they've had really good players, and Naivar coaches that position really, really well. And they've had some outstanding stars in those places. But Talanoa is such a unique, versatile player. He said, we're going to have to see if we have that versatility basically at that position anymore. And, he said every year you kind of bend your defense to the skill sets that you have on the roster. And he said, we'll see if we have that basically with that safety position. There was a little bit of talk about, we've kind of discussed it, like, is Xavier Alford, the transfer from Texas, going to be able to come in and be that guy to take over that spot? Does he have that same positional versatility? Can you use him in different ways like that? And, he was asked about Xavier, and Todd Orlando was, very positive with his remarks on him, and said that, he's a yes sir, no sir type of guy, that he really is explosive, strong. That's what he kind of remembers about him from his Texas days and when they were recruiting him. And he says he's excited to watch him because he's a run and hit guy. And those are the Todd Orlando favorites, the guys that want to go hit somebody. But he also said, we got to wait and see what he does in this defense and see where he kind of fits in now. So I think that that's one of the big question marks of this spring is trying to find, who goes in that slot at safety. And if that safety spot is going to be the same as it was last year, can someone kind of fill the role of Talanoa, or are you starting to, bend the defense a little bit different, mold it into another form so that someone else is a more versatile player? I think those are things that you learn about in the spring. And, obviously they didn't have that chance last year. So now replacing Talanoa Hufanga, I think that's one of the big question marks and big questions they want to answer this spring.
Mm-hmm. We also got to hear from Kana'i Mauga. According to Chris Trevino, who's the only one who actually saw practice on Tuesday, welcome back, by the way, Shotgun. The inside linebacker depth is a little thin, so Kana'i is going to have to get a lot of time there at spring. What are you expecting from that position group in year 2 under Orlando?
Yeah, it's going to be the big question is, Jordan Asefa, Salman Tulialapupu, Elijah Winston, who's going to fit in there? Who's going to get back healthy? There were the secondary group in practice on Tuesday was all walk-ons. So this gives Kana'i Mauga a great opportunity to step forward and take over that role, because there's questions of, are Raylan and Kana'i the guys that are going to continue to be the starters in the next year if everyone is healthy? Well, this is your opportunity to take that step forward and say, this is my role. Go find some other one to put that guy in. Hey, he's good, but you're going to have to find someone else. You're going to find some other position for him to play because this is mine. So it's a good chance for him. Kana'i talked a little bit about, how are they trying to create turnovers and stuff? He talked about, the 5-yard burst to the ball and getting all 11 guys. And again, those are things that you really preach during the spring. And you really, if the guys don't do it, then all right, let's do some extra up downs, those type things, where you may not do that during the season, just because you got to keep everybody fresh a little bit more during the season. So we'll see if those continue to be the emphasis, the emphasis on turnovers, because they were so good at it last year. So if they can continue that this year as well.
Mm-hmm. One other notable thing from the presser was that wide receiver Josh Jackson is now at cornerback. It's actually something that happened towards the end of last season. And Orlando was asked about that. What do you have to say about that transition?
He said that they needed some guys with some athletes with some ball skills, and he perfectly fits that bill for them. So they brought him in, and they kind of the look in his eye, and he was really bought into being a cornerback, and said that they've seen some natural movements for him, and he's really, really excited about him making that jump to the defensive side. And he feels like Todd Orlando feels like when Dante Williams gets a chance to show him the finer points of the position, that he's going to be, his quote was, he's going to be damn good. So, I think that's a really positive development for USC, is to add another cornerback there after losing Elijah Griffin. They weren't very deep at the cornerback position, so we'll see where they are now. They're bringing in some more bodies. They'll bring in some more bodies over the offseason as well. Should be a highly competitive position group, that DB position group as a whole, because you got some guys like Greg Johnson, who's not doing anything right now because of surgery, but him and Max Williams should be competing for one of those safety spots, the open Talanoa Hufanga safety spot, the open cornerback spot. There's definitely some big time candidates for those positions, but you still got to go out and win the job.
So it sounds like Saturday the pads will come on. We'll be able to see that practice, so make sure you watch out for Instant on Saturday. But Chuck, any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
I know on Saturday, Todd Orlando is going to be smiling from ear to ear, because he finally gets guys in pads. But one thing that he was asked a couple times about young guys, anybody stood out, and he didn't want to say anything because, again, he wants to see guys in pads. But the one guy he did note from the winter workouts that he says really developed his body is Jamar Sakona. So keep an eye on him at the defensive tackle position. Obviously, there's an opening right now, and the fact that Ishmael Sopsher is not going to be available for the spring. Maybe Sakona's a guy that really pushes his way up with some extra reps this spring. So keep an eye on him during the spring as well.
Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for USC's second day of spring camp. For Shotgun Spratling, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.